you. That was fast. Things happen here.
Miracles.
For those of you who may not know, the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition is an organization dedicated to preventing environmental causes of breast cancer through community education, research advocacy, and changes to public policy. By advocating for the investigation of toxic chemicals linked to cancer in air, water, soil, food, and consumer products, MBCC seeks to protect current and future generations from exposure in the home, community, and workplace. To support our unique mission, MBCC founded its sister organization, Silent Spring Institute. In 1994, to conduct scientific research on the link between the environment and breast cancer. With a long history of investigation into contaminants of emerging concern in the waters of Cape Cod, Silent Spring Institute has provided some of the first data on endocrine disrupting compounds, EDCs, in Cape groundwater and drinking water. Silent Spring Institute's studies of drinking water quality on Cape Cod represents some of the only research to explore contamination of drinking water sources by hormone disruptors and other wastewater chemicals coming from septic systems. Currently, not enough is known scientifically about the levels of contaminants released into groundwater from conventional and alternative wastewater treatment systems. Silent Spring Institute recently celebrated our 20th anniversary here at the Unitarian Universalist Church on May 15th. It was a joyous celebration of our legacy, but also a reflection that our work is not yet done here on Cape Cod, throughout Massachusetts, and throughout the world. The results of our research here on Cape Cod will provide answers to the causes of escalating incidence rates of cancers and ill health worldwide. Today, a woman's lifetime risk of being diagnosed with breast cancer in the U.S. is approximately 1 in 8. That is a 40% increase within the past 4 decades. According to the 2009 statistics, which is the latest data available from the CDC, Massachusetts has the 12th highest breast cancer incidence rates in the country, approximately 5.8% higher than the national average. We simply cannot continue ignoring the fact that a systematic change is needed now, and the current steps for protecting our daughters and families are inadequate. Many vital and life-saving resources are dedicated to early detection, treatment, and finding a medical cure for cancers. Unfortunately, in the U.S., only 1 to 3% of the billions of dollars raised are directed to primary prevention of cancer or breast cancer. Rising health care expenditures is a burden for the U.S. economy and is an added hardship for the patient. Millions and millions of medical research dollars are spent here in Massachusetts. Sadly, funding for prevention is increasingly difficult in the Commonwealth. Without the financial resources of the deep-pocketed lobbyists, such as American Chemical Council or American Chemistry Council, MBCC advocates heartily for funding primary prevention. Silent Spring Institute is now being stymied by a lack of responsible funding and is lacking a champion in our state Senate and House of Representatives. I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to pull out all stops tonight. I'm just going to say it like it is. You know me. I was introduced as the person who says it like it is. Many of you heard me speak at different venues, and I like to play ball nice. I like to be nice. Let's talk, let's have a conversation, let's talk about what we need, let's talk about what we need to do for the safety of our citizens, not just here on the Cape, throughout the Commonwealth, throughout the world. But things aren't going well. And so this needs to be discussed. We need to bring it into the open, not to be rabble-rousers, not to be hot-headed activists, but to be responsible adults, because we do need to change the world for our children, our grandchildren, and future generations. So for the first 9 years, Silent Spring Institute received funding, did impressive research, and released the groundbreaking Cape Cod Breast Cancer Environment Study. Silent Spring Institute's research has shaped the national model for researching contaminants and their links to breast cancer. However, if we look at the recent budget outcome of the House of Representatives and the Senate for fiscal year 2015, breast cancer prevention and environmental factors, specifically groundwater, is not a priority for our legislators, not only on the Cape, but statewide. Silent Spring Institute and the Mass Breast Cancer Coalition put forth 2 amendments for fiscal year 2015 for consideration, and both were not included in the budget. This critical funding would have allowed Silent Spring Institute to study emerging contaminants and specifically investigate exposure to chemical herbicides in groundwater in the homes on Cape Cod. 2 different water studies were approved for fiscal year 2015. Water Defense for the first time here on the Cape, and Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies. We're pleased that these 2 organizations were awarded funding for their impressive research. This research is critically important, but so is the study of our groundwater and drinking water. This is the water that we all use on a daily basis. It is apparent, given the history of the funding of the Commonwealth, that they valued Silent Spring Institute enough to fund our work, to build a foundation, to do our impressive research. Silent Spring Institute has been published in over 50 peer-reviewed, respected journals. But when it comes time to continue to study emerging contaminants and chemicals of concern, funding is nowhere to be found. Let's face it, poor results from drinking water studies are bad for business. Tourism is now driving our public health decisions. Politicians and businesses do not want poor drinking water results to hurt Cape Cod tourism dollars. Being afraid of toxic chemicals and burying your head in the Cape Cod sands is not going to help us reduce toxic exposure. Environmental injustices invade our neighborhoods, our bodies, and our well-being of our ecosystem. Perhaps the most blatant disregard for public health is the NSTAR spraying here on the Cape. Between November 18th and December 12th, 2013, NSTAR contractors surreptitiously sprayed 800 acres of Cape Cod without the knowledge or consent of the owners. As we have seen in the past, months of NSTAR's subcontractor spraying, they seem to think the label specifications, their own yearly operational plan, and code of mass regulations are merely suggestions, rather than the law. Despite the fact that all 15 Cape towns have signed resolutions opposing the spraying, and thousands of residents and tourists have complained along with local businesses, public health officials, and scientists, corporations are still dictating our exposures to toxics. The endocrine disrupting toxics found in NSTAR spraying have been linked to all types of cancers, developmental delays in children, and many other health risks. NSTAR's insistence on chemical treatment of the Cape is irresponsible at best and demonstrates a callous disregard for expressed desires of the community. Perhaps more troubling is that this spraying is unnecessary. Sue Phelan and Stephen Seymour, directors of Green Cape, have done a tremendous job in their public outreach to stop NSTAR, and I'm going to ask Sue if she can jump in a few minutes when I'm finished, and I'm almost finished. And hats off to you, Ms. Sue. You've done a tremendous job throughout the years. Thank you. Through a growing action network of advocates and volunteers and community education initiatives, MBCC, along with impressive groups like Green Cape, Lowell Center for Sustainable Production, Sierra Club, our own David Dow here in the audience, Toxics Action Center, and Alliance for a Healthy Tomorrow, and others, are engaging supporters to ensure public safety, public health decisions are not dictated by the economy. To further our unique mission of prevention, MBCC has recently launched Let's Talk Prevention, reducing toxic exposures, an educational program to increase discussions between health professionals and patients about environmental toxic exposures, and our materials are right outside on our education outreach table. In addition, MBCC has released a research updates video series to present the facts about environmental health and breast cancer prevention. Each short video features an interview with a researcher, medical professional, university professor, breast cancer activist, or other prominent figure in the field. You're next, Dick. Through these means, Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition's unique approach to preventing breast cancer continues to influence public policy on both local and national scales. And we hope one day to further reduce the burden for all consumers, help further reduce our exposure to chemical concerns, and ensure that from the manufacturing floor to the store shelves, we are confident in the products we purchase, the water that we drink, and the food that we eat to be contaminant-free. These are the tenets of a cancer-free economy, and one that we will continue to strive for. Thank you very much.
Do you want to project it?
Yes, if you will wait just a moment. I have a plan.
Okay.
I do want to invite Sue Phelan up as well. Sue is the co-founder of Green Cape, which has been around for 16 years now. And Sue is a long-time, incredible community leader that I've gotten to work with recently in the last couple of years. Green Cape is one of the major reasons that Massachusetts has a Children and Families Protection Act, which reduces pesticide use on school grounds across the state. And Green Cape has held organic lawn care programs for the last 16 years across the Cape. So, Sue, I want to invite you up to see if you have any additional comments just to give context for why we're talking about a cancer-free economy tonight.
Okay. Thanks, Claire, and special thanks to Reverend Murphy for offering to host this program, and thank you to the other co-sponsors for sharing the work that you're doing and inspiring us all. Great. Let's come higher. Oh, no. Okay, so, and I did want to especially thank Dr. Clapp for all of his sleuthing into the causes of cancer for several decades now. We shouldn't really be forced to accept any risk to our water supply or our health just because it's economically more feasible. If those risks can be avoided, they should be, and we need to move towards a cancer-free economy on Cape Cod especially, and we need to talk prevention in order to get there. Because of the Cape's sandy soils, it's very vulnerable to contaminants heading right to groundwater. Green Cape, as Claire said, we're a grassroots nonprofit that's focused really on pesticide issues on the Cape for about 16 years, and we've never had any downtime. There's a lot of pesticide use here, and we get calls every week. Our most immediate and current concern, as Cheryl mentioned, is the herbicide spraying by the public utility NSTAR on private lands as well as public lands. You and I would not be able to do that. We wouldn't be able to spray someone else's property, but NSTAR is able to do that. So there's something wrong with that regulation. Also that they don't actually notify the owner in a timely way. They may give like 5 months notice, so in all of that time you really have no idea when in that 5 months it's going to happen. And they don't ask for your consent, it's a given. NSTAR is the largest single end user of pesticides on the Cape. I know that there's been a lot of information in the paper saying, oh, but they only use 1%. Well, we all use more in the aggregate, but NSTAR uses the most on the Cape. And in just that short period of time in 2013, they sprayed over 2,000 gallons of pesticide on the Cape. As part of their... Oh, I should let you see this too. This is just to demonstrate that it's on homeowner property. It's not someplace out in the prairie. It's right up close and personal to residents. And the yearly operational plan, they're spraying all of these various herbicides in combination or singly under the power lines, over 150 miles down the spine of the Cape, and over 78% of the Zone 2s to the public water supply wells. Since they haven't fully mapped the private wells, they don't really know where all of those are, but that's not stopping them. So I made this out last night, and I was looking at the percent of active ingredients for these pesticide formulations, and I realized that the other ingredients are actually make up more of the formulation than the pesticide itself. Now, this is concerning from a number of levels because it's 57% versus 43%. So 57% is actually an unknown, and it can be anything at all. It's not identified. Only the EPA and the manufacturer know what that 57% is, and that's in the stuff that you use every day. It could even be up to 99%. So I asked you to rethink if you're using any pesticides around your home or in your garden. And that's the trade secret aspect of this almost a toxic shell game of hazardous waste and other toxic industrial byproducts recycling into various other commodities such as pesticides and even fertilizers. Fertilizers contains a lot of unknown ingredients. Scrubbings from smokestacks, mine tailings, just waste from other industries. And it's profitable to recycle these into other components. And hazardous waste is legally allowed by the EPA to be recycled into these other commodities like pesticides and fertilizers. The other ingredients can be petroleum distillates, they can be other pesticides, they can be solvents, fragrances even, in some cases, and which are known to be to act as endocrine disruptors. So the other ingredients in the product actually may be more toxic in some cases than the actual pesticide active ingredient. So I'm thinking, I hope that you took the handout from Sierra Club on the contaminants of emerging concern. Please make a point to get one of those and read it. But I'm thinking that the NSTAR herbicides and the other ingredients will be the contaminants of emerging concern in Cape Cod's future. And we still should not be forced to accept any risk to our water supply and our health that can be avoided. And certainly spraying the rights of way could be avoided. Decades went by when NSTAR was just cutting and mowing, and they can go back to that again. I have to think that there is some kind of monetary something monetary in it for them to revert back to doing the herbicide spraying. So if you have the same concerns, would you please join us and the other dedicated organizations that you see here today and work for change.
So Richard Clapp is Emeritus Professor of Environmental Health at the BU School of Public Health and an Adjunct Professor at UMass Lowell. And from 1980 to 1989, he served as the Director of the Massachusetts Cancer Registry. So please join me in welcoming Richard Clapp.
Thanks so much for inviting me, and what a great, interesting group here. I was thinking as I was sitting here, I first visited the Cape, I think about 55 years ago, and I've been visiting the Cape ever since. I never lived on Cape Cod, but have friends who live here, have worked with Sue, have worked with Cheryl, have worked with a number of other groups. At one point there was the Upper Cape Concerned Citizens that you may all remember from the days around the Mass Military Reservation. So have a lot of sort of history in this area, and it's a pleasure to be back here and get a chance to talk about some new things. So I'm here with Carlos Espinosa Toro, who's a member of the Jamaica Plain New Economy Transition team that we're working with. So Carlos is going to push the button to advance the slides, and then he's going to say a few things at the end about some work that we're doing. Oh, that's much better, thanks. Some work that we're doing in Jamaica Plain. And I want to say this right at the outset. What we're going to talk about is a sort of local version in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts of what we're working on. It's by no means an attempt to undercut or supplant or take the place of the fantastic work that you're already doing and have been doing for decades here on the Cape. It's just a new approach that we wanted to share with you. That's why we call it a cancer-free economy. And our work has been focused so far in Jamaica Plain. So let's take a few more introductory slides. I'll have to go through some of these quickly. The Lowell Center for Sustainable Production, which is I think where maybe Cheryl referred to me as working part-time these days. I'm Professor Emeritus at BU, and I do have an affiliation there, but most of my work these days is with the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production. And the reason for that is that this is a group, it's an entity within the UMass Lowell campus in Lowell that is trying to change the terms, change the framework by which we think about our systems of production that have produced so many toxic exposures over the years, both to workers, to people who live in communities like this, who drink the drinking water that Mass Military Reservation polluted and fell with, and so forth. We want to turn that to a different framework where we're thinking about solutions. And we think that the systems of production that we already have within them the opportunities for solutions to the production of chemical waste, especially chemical waste. I didn't hear anyone say they were from the Cape Downwinders, but I personally think a cancer-free economy will also not be powered by nuclear fission and nuclear power plants. That's a separate story, and we may, if you want, talk about that some in the question and answer section. What we're going to focus now on is our approach to thinking about ways to have a cancer-free economy that doesn't include chemical carcinogens. So, next. And this is the project that I'm referring to in Jamaica Plain. It's a collaboration between Jamaica Plain New Economy Transition, where Carlos works, and where Chuck Collins also works, but couldn't be here tonight. And the Lowell Center for Sustainable Production, where I work, and two colleagues of mine, Polly Hoppin and Molly Jacobs. The three of us are actually the collaborators on this project. Jamaica Plain Center South Main Streets, one particular person, Mary Hannon, which is a group of retail establishments or owners of retail establishments that have formed and do collaborative projects in Jamaica Plains called Main Streets. So Main Streets organizations throughout Boston, perhaps on the Cape as well. Toxics Action Center, where Claire is from, and Sylvia Brody, who is the director of Toxics Action Center. The two have been close collaborators on this work as we've developed it. We're not quite a year old. We started this all last August, actually. And then there's this grant that we got from the Toxics Use Reduction Institute at UMass Lowell. The nickname is TURI. So TURI is all about what it sounds like, toxics use reduction in Massachusetts. And it's funded by, it was set up by the Toxic Use Reduction Act, TURA, in 1989, and it's funded by a fee for companies in Massachusetts that use any of a list of toxic chemicals. So they have to pay a fee. It's like a tax on the use of that chemical if they're going to continue to use it in the state. And that tax or that fee, I'm sure they would rather call it a fee, goes to the state government to fund, among other things, the Toxic Use Reduction Institute, whose purpose is really to figure out alternatives to what they're using now, such that there would be less toxic effect on the workers and the communities in which the Massachusetts companies exist. So because that funding exists, they give out community grants, and one of the community grants is to this project in Jamaica Plain. Next one. I'm going to say just a few things about this because I think a lot of you already know this information. Cheryl has already shared some of it. It's a huge problem, cancer in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our communities. It's 1.6, if you go by the latest American Cancer Society statistics, 1.6 million people will be, more than that, will be diagnosed with invasive cancer this year. 13 million people are now living in the U.S. with cancer, so they're either just got it or still being diagnosed and treated, or they've had it for a while, as some of you in this room have, but are still living with that sort of shadow over their head. So you count that all up. That's the prevalence of people who have been diagnosed or are living with cancer. It's 13 million people right now in this country. And billions of dollars have been spent on this problem, and we still have it. And it's, for some types of cancer, it's still going up. And in some age groups, like children, it's still going up. So that's our challenge. Cheryl used the word burden, the burden of breast cancer. The burden of this disease is enormous in this country and in the world, really, but we'll talk for now about this country and this state and then on Cape Cod. I'm not going to mention all these volunteer organizations. Next. This is the graph of the overall incidence of all types of cancer combined. The top, the green line, is men, and you can see there's that big peak in around 1989, 1990, 1991. Does anyone know what that was from? The peak?
Smoking?
Nope. The smoking is pushing that thing up regularly, but the peak is from prostate cancer screening. That's when the new test came available in the late 80s and early 90s. So there were a lot of men out there with prostate cancer that hadn't been diagnosed, and the PSA test allowed that to happen, so it jumped up. And then the bottom line is women, and that's also steadily been going up, maybe slightly coming down recently, and that might be because finally, in both men and women, lung cancer is beginning to come down because the prevalence of smoking has come down over the years. So in some ways, that's proof of the point. Prevention works. If you don't get the exposure that causes that cancer, then you don't get the cancer. So that's, I think, well, that's definitely begun to happen in men, that lung cancer has come down fairly steadily in men in recent years, and it's just now beginning, lung cancer is just now beginning to come down in women. It's the leading cause of cancer death in women, lung cancer. Next slide. These are some of the ones that are less commonly talked about, but which are still going up. And non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is at the top of that list. Breast cancer is sort of beginning to level off, and we hope it stays leveled off and doesn't begin to go back up again. But non-Hodgkin's lymphoma has been going up steadily. Kidney cancer and thyroid cancer has been going up faster than any other. Thyroid cancer and liver cancer, the two most rapidly increasing types of cancer in this country and in this state, in Massachusetts. Nobody has an answer for why thyroid cancer should be going up that dramatically. There's a person at the National Cancer Institute named Elaine Ron, who I actually called up. I had met her, and I called her up and said, "Why is this?" And she said, "We don't know. There's no readily available, it's not just better diagnosis. You can feel it, but that hasn't changed, that you can feel it for decades. There is a new needle biopsy method that's used more commonly now that may be some of the answer, but it's not the whole answer. So nobody can give you a full answer of why thyroid cancer should be going up. Luckily, it's one that's quite treatable, and it's pretty obvious. So once it's diagnosed at an early enough stage, it's treatable. So people don't die of thyroid cancer in anything like this kind of sharply increasing rate. Kidney cancer is another one that is connected to exposure to trichloroethylene in particular. Trichloroethylene is a degreasing solvent that's used widely, and it's a widespread water contaminant in this state. It was used widely in, for example, in degreasing metal parts at the General Electric plant in Lynn. Kidney cancer is going up in this state, as it is in many parts of the U.S., and it's been recently linked to excessive exposure to trichloroethylene, chlorinated solvent. I get tempted to go into lots of stories like this, so I'm going to stop myself right now. Next slide. This is what I mentioned earlier. This is the childhood cancer picture. So the incidence, that's the new diagnoses every year, by year, of childhood cancer. The two leading kinds are brain cancer and leukemia. Those are the two principal, more than half of childhood cancers of those two types. It's going up steadily for the last 35 years, 40 years. Deaths due to childhood cancer, deaths of children due to cancer is coming down. And that's because, especially with leukemia, there are now effective treatments for childhood leukemia so that kids don't die of it. They may get it later because the chemicals that are given, the chemotherapeutic agents that are given to treat childhood leukemia may cause a cancer later in life, but at least you get some more years out of that. And not every child who's been treated successfully will then get subsequent cancer because of the chemotherapy. So that's a mixed story. Incidence is going up, but deaths due to cancer in children are going down. Yep, next. So again, these, I think you may have all, or I have made, either Cheryl or I have mentioned, I think, most of these things. It's not genetic changes that are producing these trends, these increases of specific types, for example. It's not particularly better diagnosis, although there are, PSA did allow a lot of cases of prostate cancer to be diagnosed that wouldn't have been before. Might not even caused death before, they just would have been there at death. Some people say you may die with prostate cancer, but not of prostate cancer, so those cases were being picked up by the screening test. And so if that's not those first two things, we think, and I know Silent Spring thinks and Cheryl thinks, I think, it's environmental causes, things that are in the general environment or the workplace environment that continue to push up some of these types of cancer. I'd say two leading candidates of that are non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and kidney cancer. So that's why we're doing this. That's the context for this cancer-free economy. This is another figure that we use at UMass Lowell, at this Lowell Center for Sustainable Production. This is a production cycle of what we call broadly the chemical economy. So it starts with petrochemicals, right, from oil, and then those get the raw oil gets refined into some more specific product that's made into a particular chemical that then is used in some other product as either a component or a precursor of some product that's being made. That has to be sold often in bulk, then to a retailer, and then it's made into a product, or it has been made into a product that is consumed and ultimately has to be disposed of. So that's the cycle. Next slide is, where do we see cancer in that? Carlos? Carlos was so bemused by that cycle.
I know, yeah, I was really into it, sorry.
So there are health studies, epidemiologic studies of all steps in this process. That's part of what I do and did in my working life. Claire said 30 years, it's actually more than that, but in any case, I gave her that figure, so it's now 40 years, I guess, of looking at this stuff and doing studies of this type of thing. So in most of these steps, there are either workers or sometimes consumers who are exposed to chemicals that can cause cancer. And in some instances, the industry or the workplace, it's a strong link that has been established with cancer. So that's the cycle that we're in. Next slide. There are lots of organizations that are addressing this problem of the increase in cancer or the production of cancer at these various stages of the production cycle. There are many that are focused on the cure, improving treatments so that people either get cured or in remission so they can live a longer and hopefully pleasant and productive life, even after having been diagnosed with cancer. We support that totally. We think that that has to continue. We're glad that it happens, of course. We, meaning the people that are working on this project, some of us have our own personal stories, either family members or family members in my case, but years ago. And my best friend died 3 years ago of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma earlier than he should have. So that's part of what motivates us, actually, to try to work on this. And so we think better cures, better treatments is good, but we think the balance has to be also shifted toward preventing this disease in the first place, so that you don't even have to worry about the cure because it didn't happen. That patient didn't get that disease that had to be treated in sometimes this dire way. And we strongly support Silent Spring Institute, and I would add Green Cape to that, for the work that they've done, and that is about prevention. It's about raising consciousness about the exposures that can cause breast cancer, raising consciousness about the chemicals that are sprayed on rights of way that wind up on either people breathing it directly, as Sue's photograph showed, or it's in the drinking water. It gets into groundwater and is in drinking water. So in any case, we support that type of work. We want to do it ourselves. Next slide. These I'm going to skip, actually, Carlos. Let's just go through these. This is sort of Biology 301, and it's not worth spending the time on it. Okay, that's good. So it's a multifactorial disease. There's multiple factors that go into the production of a cancer in an individual. Some people call it the causal pie. There's a pie for every person that constitutes the sufficient reason why they got cancer. And that pie has several slices or pieces. So this is the group of slices that may comprise the cause of one person getting cancer. And at least one of those is industrial and agricultural chemicals. We're not here to say how big that slice is or how small it is. It's a slice. And by this scheme, you take away any slice, any of those slices, smoking, something about your diet, that isn't going to be a sufficient cause. That person won't get that cancer. That's the notion of a causal pie. And actually, it's sort of mainstream epidemiologic thinking these days and thinking about cancer. But there are lots of arguments about, here's my phone going off. I don't even know who it is. So in any case, what we're focused on here is removing that top right slice by industrial and environmental chemical exposures. Ways to do that, multiple ways to do that, some of which you're already doing. Okay, next. Another landmark, I guess, in this whole process was in the year 2010 when this came out. This is the President's Cancer Panel report for the years, it covered the years 2008, 2009, but it came out in May of 2010. And it focused on this question of what is the burden of cancer that's caused by environmental, meaning environmental and occupational exposures. So here's a quote. The true burden of environmentally induced cancers has been grossly underestimated. This is the President's Cancer Panel. These are people who are established to review the government's cancer program. It's actually staffed by people at the National Cancer Institute. So there's the panel was actually supposed to be 3 people. At the time of this, there were only 2. 2 people who were very famous, actually. One was a lab scientist named Margaret Kripke, who does research especially on melanoma. We can talk about that later in the question and answer. And then Dr. LaFall, who was a surgeon, an oncologic surgeon, surgical oncologist at Howard University in Washington. They were the panelists that listened to testimony. I was one of the people, a couple of other friends from UMass Lowell and other colleagues from around the country. Actually, there were 4 public meetings where we made our presentations to the panel. And then there was this army of people from the National Cancer Institute, furiously writing down everything that was said, taking our handouts, and then crafting this report that said some pretty remarkable things. So, removing carcinogens and other toxins from our food, water, air that needlessly increase healthcare costs, cripple our nation's productivity, and devastate American lives is something that we should do. We were stunned when this came out. We said, This is the President's Cancer Families who were appointed by George W. Bush. This is not what we were expecting. And so they either bought it or took it in and incorporated it, and the staff wrote it up, and the two panelists that we didn't expect to have anything like this to say were strong, actually, both of them, when they released this report. A couple more quotes from this. So they called for basically the precautionary principle, which you may have heard of, which is in the absence of absolute 100% proof, we still have to act in order to prevent dire circumstance or dire consequences like cancer. And so that's the opposite of that is a reactionary approach, which is you wait until the disease has already happened or bodies have already been counted, and then you do something. That's the backwards. That's from a public health point of view. That's doing it backwards. That's not trying to prevent disease. That's waiting until the bodies have been counted. So we've got to move. That's what we have now. I mean, that's sort of how it works. We have to prove in court, so to speak, that there's enough evidence that this, say, chemical is harmful before it can be taken off the market. So this precautionary approach is actually the European approach right now through something they call REACH, which it's an acronym that basically says you have to provide the data before you can put the chemical on the market. And the slogan is no data, no market. So that's the goal, actually, is to get to some place like that. It's not going to happen in current Congress or current administration for that matter. So, right, I guess that goes without saying. But so we have to do it at the local level. Next. And this is another way out. Is chemists learning how to do this differently. So there's something called green chemistry. It's a field, actually. It's a sort of a subspecialty within the field of chemistry. It's taught at UMass, for example, UMass Boston, UMass Lowell, taught at Stanford. It's taught at a lot of universities now. It's fairly new, actually. I think the first book called Green Chemistry was published in 1997. And so the President's Cancer Panel basically endorsed that. Next. This is from that book, 1998, I misspoke. The utilization of a set of principles that reduces or eliminates the use or generation of hazardous substances in the design, manufacture, and application of chemical products. So it's a new way of thinking as a chemist about what are we doing here? What are we making here? Is it just about reducing costs, or is it about something else, broader? And John Warner, who was one of the founders of this field, said, he described himself as having gone through a chemistry education where that never came up once in his class. What would be a way of doing this that didn't harm the environment? It's all about other priorities and other goals, most of which have to do with reducing costs and improving competitiveness or profits for the company that's making it. So it's a new way of thinking that's beginning to get traction in this country. Next. So here's what we're doing in Jamaica Plain, and I'll end, I think, with this, or maybe one other slide. And this, again, this is a local initiative. It's sort of a pilot project. We consider it a pilot for what we hope can be done in other communities in Massachusetts, and then ultimately other communities elsewhere in this country. So we're trying to help Carlos and his colleagues at JPNet in particular, inventory local retailers that, among other things, are dry cleaners. Dry cleaning is mostly done in this country using a chemical called perchloroethylene, 4 chlorines on a 2-carbon chain. I guess you call it a chain. And that has been linked in epidemiologic studies, lots of them now, to both non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and bladder cancer. Auto body shops sometimes use trichloroethylene. That was the other solvent that I mentioned that had been used at the GE plant in Lynn, among lots of other places in this state. That has been linked to kidney cancer. And it's also used as a degreaser, at least at some points, in auto body shops, as are brake shoes in some auto body shops where they're being repaired, blown up into the air and breathed in. So those are 2 carcinogenic exposures, preventable carcinogenic exposures that occur in body shops. Nail salons and beauty salons, especially if they use a product, I've never used this product, but it's called Brazilian Blowout. That releases formaldehyde, both to the people who are applying it and to the people for whom it has blown out their hair. I don't even know what that means. I may have at one point. But in any case, that's something that nail salons are beginning to take note of, is that, and there's one right near my house, in fact, a beauty salon that says, we don't use Brazilian blowout. In fact, we are formaldehyde free. That show, and they have very strong customer base. It's not like it scared people away. In fact, it probably attracted some people. So that can be done everywhere, where there are nail salons and beauty salons that use that product. And then lastly, I'll say, in Boston, there's something called the Green and Clean program in the public health department. It's called Boston Public Health Commission. They actually give out sort of citations for businesses that do either green or clean, meaning non-toxic, or especially, I think, non-carcinogenic methods in whatever they're doing. So an auto body shop in Jamaica Plain got one of those citations from the city health department. And then what we're talking a lot now, and I think Carlos may say a little more about, is wet cleaning as an alternative to dry cleaning. As a steam-based method as an alternative to perchloroethylene-based method of cleaning clothes. And now I'm sure I'm way over time, so see if we can wrap this up quickly, and Carlos will speak. Yeah, why don't you take it from here? You don't have to, yeah, I don't. You have to use that slide.
Yeah, probably. Okay. Please, thank you. How much time do we have?
Why don't we say 10 to 15 minutes?
Okay. Try not to take much time. Hello, everyone. That's going to be very hard to follow here. I'm not Chuck Collins. I'm so sorry about that. But I am Carlos Espinosa, and I work with the Jamaica Plain New Economy Transition. And we're a community organization. We're based in Jamaica Plain. It's a neighborhood of Boston. And we really work directly with folks in the community in particular, because we want to create a local economy that is equitable for everybody, that addresses income inequality. But we also want to address climate change at the same time. So we bring those two ingredients, income inequality and climate change, in order to do our work. So, based on what Dick had just mentioned, I just wanted to say that that research and the presentation is fantastic, and is what we bring to folks in the community. And the question that we ask ourselves is, when we look at these traditional livelihood businesses in the area, how do we convey that information to folks who may have 2 or 3 jobs, who've been working on these livelihood businesses for many years, have children, have actually maybe already been exposed to these kind of chemicals, whether it's a mechanic garage or whether it's a dry cleaner? How do we talk to them about it? Do we convey lots of information? How do we talk in a manner that we can start to generate solutions, right? What can we do now about it? What is it that we can do now? So we seek to transition local small businesses away from the use of carcinogens. Okay, when we talk to them, we ask for what are the ideas that we can do. People say, there's some things that we can do here at the local level. And we do it by leveraging the aggregated purchasing power. What does that mean? That means we try to create demand for these businesses. We try to create demand that will support the transition from perchlorate to wet cleaning, which is another way of doing cleaning that doesn't use carcinogens. And also from the civic support of JP residents. And I'll talk a little bit about that, but that's the main gist of what we're doing. So in our project, this is something that I work with directly with Dick, with Chuck. We're funded by Turi. We have a great team. We have different activities. One of the main activities that we have, as you have heard already, is the research that we do in order to think about there are things that we can do at the local level. But in addition to that, we conduct forums, just like this one. We conducted a first forum in November last year, yes, November the 6th, in fact. And we brought about, let's say, about 150 folks to talk about this. This is sometimes a very delicate subject for folks who are not accustomed to listen to this kind of topics. So we conducted these forums in order to educate, but also in order to promote some brainstorming activities that people can do right away. Okay? So we try to generate solutions. In addition to that, we're also simultaneously, we work with businesses, directly with businesses. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story about a business that we've been working with, which is transition for perchlority into wet cleaning. And one important thing is that at all of these events, we not only think about educating, but also we're thinking about creating the demand to help these businesses transition, and we do that by promoting a pledge. It's a signature, that's what it is, but it's a pledge in which folks said, I will be willing to patronize a business as a transition from using carcinogens to using safe alternatives, right? And we've accumulated roughly about 100, 150 of these pledges. And we use that because this is a motivation and incentive for small businesses to say, oh, so we have support from the community here, so it's easier for us to think about transition. And also we work with Turi Toxics Action Center, which works at a much more statewide level. And this is actually an example of some of that collaboration right now, working in a different place than just Jamaica Plain. Next. Now, this is a story of the actual work that we've been doing and how it's been translating into an actual action. Okay? I just want to say that this is very specific to Jamaica Plain, but I'm going to say it in a very passionate manner to see if maybe there's something that could be done in other places, or maybe it can reach a different scale. Okay? But I just want to let you know this is specifically in Jamaica Plain. So in Jamaica Plain we have traditional livelihood businesses. Some of them, in addition to mechanic and nail salons, there's also dry cleaners. So we did a search about dry cleaners, in particular those who were doing the dry cleaning in-house, not drop-offs, right? Because we think it will be very powerful if we can transition one of these dry cleaners into a wet cleaning. Okay? This couple here, you can see really well, Mayora Vargas and Ernesto Vargas. They're an immigrant couple. She's from Guatemala. He's from Colombia. They have owned their businesses called J&P Cleaners for several years, roughly a little bit more than 10 years. They have a couple of places. One of them is in Roslindale. They wanted to move to Jamaica Plain because the one in Roslindale was, they were being asked to move because it was going to be converted into a different kind of business. So we met them at this demonstration of wet cleaning in Walpole, in Walpole, Massachusetts. At this point is when we started learning about what wet cleaning is and what are the benefits of it. But as you can see, I don't know if you can look at their faces, they're totally skeptical, right? They're like, so how much money is going to cost? Am I going to be able to do this? We've been working with perchlorate for 10 years. It certainly takes the stains very fast, and it's the industry standard, right? So we work with them. We talk to them. Okay, we provide the resources to them. We let them know that there's people supporting them with the pledges. We let them know that Turi supports with $15,000 of a grant, or maybe even more resources. You can see J.O. Nash in the back. There she's the representative from Turi. And after our conversations promoting the benefits that they could have and also how we can support them, because we don't just let them know, okay, change and that's it, right? We need to support that transition. It takes time, right? We don't just say, well, okay, here you go, here's the money, okay, now you do it. No, we are working with them, okay, step by step. So then Myra is convinced and let her husband know, says, we should really change, right? They're taking a big risk by doing that. We've been talking to other dry cleaners in the area. They're not changing. Okay, they know that they know their work. They know what they're going to do. They are making a difference. They're changing. Okay, so that right now, what we're trying to do for them, in addition to providing the grant that they've got from Turi in order to buy the equipment and also for the installation, we're creating a Kickstarter campaign. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but you're not. It's just a way of crowdsourcing or generating funds from regular folks, from everybody. Okay? So we're creating a Kickstarter campaign where we're raising funds in order for them to start their businesses, to transition with enough money, and also to be able to prosper. But also for us, it's important to let people understand and demonstrate that businesses, traditional livelihood businesses that have been around for a long time, can go green and prosper. Okay? Usually the case is, well, you go green, but then it's more expensive. They can prosper. So we're trying to make that point. So that's the story of what's happening with JMP Cleaners. And I guess I want to just close by saying that, again, this is an example of what we're doing in Jamaica Plain, specifically in an area where a lot of traditional livelihood business owners are folks of color. But this is an example of how, businesses can transition. And I think coming here, talking to you is about thinking about what are the lessons from this, or how we can do this kind of application in other parts of the state.
Great. So I'd love to open it up for questions and discussion. And actually, I wonder if we could invite all Dick and Cheryl and Sue and Carlos to maybe we can kind of take the questions as a group. What are your folks' reactions? Thoughts? David?
One of the contaminants of concern at the Joint Base Cape Cod is perchlorate, which influences the ISA uptake in the thyroid gland. And do you think that has any relationship to the increase in thyroid cancer you were talking about?
Not that I'm aware of here, no. I mean, it's looked at, there have been studies of perchlorate groundwater contamination in other parts of the U.S., and it is mostly thyroid disease. I don't think I'm aware of any link to thyroid cancer. It's a fair question, but not that I'm aware of.
Other thoughts, reactions, questions, comments?
I have a question for you, Carlos. When you deal with a business transition like that, is the product they're going to, the wet cleaning, as effective, almost as effective as what they were using, the perk?
I'm going to say yes, and the demonstration that happened in Walpole, the one that you saw in the picture, proved that was the case. Now, there is a learning process, right? So JMP Cleaners right now, for instance, is being trained by the owners of KMK Cleaners, which were the ones in the demonstration, in order to troubleshoot through that transition. So in other words, at the very beginning, maybe there's going to be some mixes that they might have to change, but then later on, they'll make sure they get to the sweet spot of those changes.
Yeah, fascinating slide. Starting off with petroleum, refining, making organic chemicals, making whatever. And my concern is, though, when you have that cycle set up, there's a lack of information on how you can't get the information from the companies. The one perfect example would be fracking. And not important in Massachusetts, I realize, but problem is hell on wheels to get the information on the organic materials that they shove down those wells. Now, one can guess that they're probably the same sort of chemicals that were used off of Louisiana, for example, to sequester the hydrocarbons in the ocean and then disperse them, which is basically what's happening in fracking within the... It's close enough. But the point is, you're not getting the information. So you've set up a beautiful plan, but unless something is done to force the companies to give you the information on the constituents. I mean, or somebody else talked about pesticides and what have you, that you have large percentages of unknown materials. I don't think that's as important, though, simply because when you add the inert ingredients, it's something of making it easy for the companies to solubilize it. There's a variety of other things. They're usually cheap, and they're not going to do much, because pesticides, the large organic molecules, the phosphorus-containing molecules, they're deadly. And they're even more deadly sometimes as they start to break down. So I'm not worried about those percentages. But anyway, getting back to my point, when you have that cycle, unless you get the information, and they don't seem to be forthcoming.
Well, it depends. I mean, that cycle was actually created by a colleague at UMass Lowell in something called the Department of Work Environment. That's what they study, is the work environment. And they study work processes, how a solvent works when it's, you know, at this concentration in air or in this concentration in some other solvent. And they put that, I mean, some of this is trade secrets, as you said, as you're implying, or I guess the formal term is confidential business information. So the companies aren't even going to tell an academic department like UMass Lowell's Department of Work Environment what exactly they're using. But some are forthcoming about that. And one other method, believe it or not, is lawsuits, where you take the company to court. And then, in the contentious process, the adversarial process in court, some of that information comes out.
Speaking of lawsuits, one of the biggest disposal modes of organic chemicals would be disposal. In industry, in university labs, I hate to say, we have our so-called ubiquitous waste jar. You put the stuff in, and you put caps on, and companies come in and take it. And what they do, they just throw it in the landfill.
And Dick, weren't you describing the European model of REACH with the burden of proof? That's the dream, right? Where the burden of proof is on the...
Right, and it makes more transparent what actually is going into the products, because you have to produce the research showing its relative safety before you can even use it.
And how do you get rid of it?
And then how you get rid of it is part of the consideration, actually. It's a cradle-to-grave type system.
Many, many years ago in Canada, you were required to separate the organic molecules, and some you could burn, some you couldn't. We don't do that.
Yeah, right. We're catching up.
So I'd like to ask a question, if may I?
Sure.
Is there anything that we can do as citizens to help with this project regarding procethylene in different dry cleaning businesses throughout the state of Massachusetts? For example, if you know that there's a dry cleaning, you use a particular dry cleaning business and you let them know that in fact you're interested in them considering green cleaning, should we refer them to you?
Well, sure, but say that asking that question is like a first step. What are you using? Apparently New York City has a new ordinance that requires dry cleaners to say what they're using, to put it on their front window, what chemicals they're using. So that at least creates consumer knowledge about, well, I don't like that. Maybe there's a place that does wet cleaning. I can go there instead. That's one thing, like the New York City ordinance. The other is in California, it's in the year 2020, dry cleaners will have to have switched. They won't be allowed to use perchloroethylene any longer. So that's quite a ways out. It allows this transition to occur over several years. But I think we need a law like that in Massachusetts. You get it?
Yeah, I think, did you? So 1, 2, 3, 4.
I was going to ask Cheryl, I know you've done a lot of studies on household chemicals and then the water issues. Where are you now? I know this funding is always an issue, but where are we with the studies around this for the Cape?
Well, as I said previously, we haven't received funding for 2015, but that won't stop us. We have a grant from Mass Environmental Trust, so we partnered with Falmouth, and we're doing an eco-study project on the eco-toilets. And that's a project that Dr. Laurel Shader is heading up. She was one of the speakers here on May 15th, as you remember. And we'll be working to obtain funding from other sources, federal sources, and private donations are coming in. And so we're doing well in that aspect. But I'll tell you, we did take a hit with the state. It's really, really disappointing and concerning. And so I invite people to please not hesitate to call your legislators, your state senator, and your state representatives to let them know that it really doesn't make sense to support a scientific group to get started, to lay a good foundation to begin to do research, and then when you start to find important answers, to say, gee, we're not interested in you anymore. Flies in the face of common sense that you have to keep going to build upon that foundation. But we'll keep going.
Good.
I have two questions. One is, so is there any standard if a cleaner says it's green or, because I know recently a cleaner in our neighborhood said they're green cleaning, right? But what does that mean? Does that mean...
Well, there's such a thing as greenwashing. I mean by that,
Yeah.
Unintentioned.
That might not need it.
it may not. I think the key question is, are you using chemicals for dry cleaning or are you using wet cleaning? So if they say we're using wet cleaning, or we ship our stuff to a place that does wet cleaning, that I would say is clean. And if they can sort of back it up, I would trust that. But just because they say it's right.
And then I have a question for Sue. So can you give a brief update on what's happening with NSTAR right now? You said they had sprayed the last few months of 2013, and what the latest is for their spraying the keep right now?
They're not spraying right now. They would have to notify in the newspaper. And so I've been looking in the newspaper daily for notification. And then there's a number of things that you can do to keep yourself from being exposed. And we have a list of things on our website. But of course, we hope it doesn't come to that. But also, I would hope that people would contact their state reps and state senator about this. It seems to have gone off their radar for the moment. But it's very important, and it's not something that can be dismissed. Let them know of your concerns, and just don't let up.
Can you request that they notify you when they're in your area? Is that something
You could do that, but people have.
Required.
People have, and they don't notify, unfortunately.
I have two Socratic type questions which are meant to be thought-provoking. Anybody on the panel can address them if they want, but it's mainly to get people in the room thinking. But I'd like to preface by wondering if anybody notices the irony that we're sitting here talking about industrial chemicals while the scent of horse manure wafts through our open windows. Almost the entirety of humanity was exposed to manure from draft animals until the petroleum economy replaced them with machinery. It's just, I can't help but notice the irony. But my first question is, when you're trying to isolate the cause of something, you try to eliminate all the variables except for one. And when they're testing, they do the rack tests for toxic effects, for the LD25s and the LD50s for acute effects, and then for chronic dietary effects and so forth. You keep a rat in a cage, you know exactly what he's eating, you know exactly how many hours he sleeps, and only one thing is different. That's the controlled variable. We can't do that with people because people don't live in cages. People don't actually know what they eat. I've read studies where you ask people to report what they eat, and they say, I had a glass of juice and a piece of dry toast for breakfast. And then you do the same study with a scientist following them around with a clipboard, and he finds out that they ate 3 pieces of toast with butter and a glass of juice and some bacon. People underreport what they eat. But it's important. Nobody knows what they really ingest. But it's important to know. And there's another thing. In my generation, at least a quarter of all baby boomers experimented with illegal materials of unknown composition. And I don't know if we will ever be able to uncover the epidemiological effects of that. It's important to know, but we can't know. So that's just... and another thing, people are afraid of industrial chemicals if they don't become familiar with them. I've handled all sorts of, solvents, because I've done a lot of painting, home building, and I've handled herbicides and insecticides and so forth on my farm. I never had an environmental problem. I never suffered ill effects, acute or chronic, from any of those things. The only things I've actually suffered from is sunburn, hornet stings, and poison ivy. I've had poison ivy 1,000 times. Is there any way of knowing what that long-term effect is? These are, again, you can address this if you want, but it's a Socratic question, really. Go ahead.
I want to turn when it's my turn. There are other people that I think can be more.
Are you asking a question or are you responding?
Well, I just wanted to make a comment.
I'm taking too long, I realize, but that's only question number one.
So, but that was very interesting. when I was young, and I've never said this publicly, but I feel that my time has come. When I was a young child, at 11 years old, my father decided that it was time for me to work. And my father owned a dry cleaning business. And I, as the oldest of four, was assigned to begin working to help in the back, to bag the clothes with the plastic and to help waiting on the customers. And I remember enjoying immensely going into the back room to visit my dad as he sprayed the clothes on that special silver table. And I go, Daddy, what's that? He goes, it's called perk. And I go, does that smell good? And I love the smell of perk. I think I became a little bit addicted to it. And I go back and I smell this perk. Now, my sister was 3 years younger than I and very shy, so she wasn't, enlisted into this. They didn't make her go to work. I still resent her for that a little bit. Then there was my brother, who was 3 years younger than her, and he also worked for Dad. And my baby brother, he was spoiled, and he didn't have to work at all either. But what I want to say is that I've often thought about, and certainly I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, I'm not a health professional, but I just have to wonder about why it is, or could it be, let's put it that way, that I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer at age 41, no family history, and I did have the genetic testing finally, my daughter made me. And my baby brother was diagnosed, the one who also worked with the I can't say perk.
Just say perk.
And he loved the way it smelled too, because we used to talk about it. Let's go back there together. When finally he came along, and I remember that. And then he died a few years later. We were going through chemo together. Could it be that exposure to perk that maybe lent a hand to us both of us being diagnosed, he with colorectal, me with breast? You think?
When it comes to an individual person who I love, it's hard for me to make a diagnosis, even with that much information. But you were exposed to a carcinogen, there's no question, and you were exposed to other carcinogens as well, probably. What epidemiologists do is we look at groups of people. So dry cleaners in particular, as a group, have higher rates of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and bladder cancer. Not so much breast cancer, but this is probably mostly men, actually, that they were studying. So for you, I couldn't answer that, or your brother for that matter.
So it wasn't for me to bring up my personal story, although I did feel the need. But that it's great that you were not diagnosed with breast cancer while you were exposed to chemicals. Not everyone is as lucky as you are, and that's all the point that I wanted to make.
The other version of that is not everyone who smokes cigarettes gets lung cancer.
Right.
In fact, the vast majority don't. But some do, and way more do than people who don't smoke at all.
I was curious about dry cleaning, whether the residues left on your clothes are not so good to get exposed to, and whether that might be an angle to come at if you're trying to make a change in that area. Do you address, when you talk to people, you say, not only is it bad for the environment that you're doing this, but when you put your clothes on, you're exposing yourself. Is there exposure, I guess, is the question I have.
Yeah, I think it's not so much when you put your clothes on. There are people who've studied this exact thing. What happens when you bring the clothes home?
Right.
And if they still have the plastic wrapping, it stays there, the off-gassing perchloroethylene, until you take the plastic off, and then it's in your indoor air. So it's not so much putting it on, it's breathing it. And whoever else is in your family is breathing it. So airing them out, maybe taking that plastic wrapper off as you come inside the house, might be the best way to get rid of that off-gassing as soon as you can, before it builds up in your closet.
I don't actually dry clean anything that's very easy. Just in terms of...
No, there's some exposure that way, but I don't think it's from...
The other dry cleaning question that comes to mind is, you say wet cleaning. Is wet cleaning chemical-free necessarily, automatically, or do you also have to follow through and make sure it's steam without filling the blank?
Well, it's steam and soap. I mean, actually, Carlos probably could answer that question better than me.
So at this point, is it there's not wet cleaning that is as toxic as dry cleaning?
Wash wet cleaning?
How do we know there's nothing bad in wet cleaning?
It's been thoroughly studied, actually.
Yes, it's heavily on the tour report. So we know that there are safe alternatives which is, one of them is wet cleaning, which has the one of the, from the many safe alternatives that are out there, maybe
But
5 or
just
6.
the term wet cleaning,
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily imply that there are no chemicals in it. You might have to go further and check that.
Could you wet clean with chemicals? Do you have to ask, is this
Wait,
not?
If
so,
we're trying to get people
yeah.
to do something safe or look for a place
Exactly.
that's safe, can we just say wet cleaning, or are there also...
Oh, I see your point.
chemicals in
Okay,
wet cleaning?
sorry.
So I'm just wondering,
I think
again,
if-
it's terminology. Does
I
that
think
mean-
if you want to be very sure, I mean, there's not a law right now that says thou shalt put wet cleaning. And if you don't do, if you don't follow this pattern, then you get a fine.
And there's nothing, I mean...
But there is, so one thing you can do is, there are ways to identify wet cleaning, and we have some resources about that. And it's not just, it's an entirely different process. So if you go into the place and it says wet cleaning, and you actually look at the way in which they handle the clothes, the washer and dryers, and the way in which they steam and iron, you can recognize that it's wet cleaning. Now, if for instance you go to a place and they said, oh, we'll take it somewhere to get wet cleaning, you have to really you have to really ask questions at that point.
Okay,
Right?
so I'm not quite getting, the point is all wet cleaning without chemicals, or can there be wet cleaning that also has chemicals? At this point, the technology, do they ever use toxic chemicals with wet cleaning?
No, they don't.
They don't.
They use soaps. No, they don't
That's
use,
it.
yeah.
So we actually have to stop. So I'm just going to close this out, and then if folks want to stay, and please eat the food because there's so much. But I'd just like to see a show of hands. How many people learned something new? How many people feel inspired? How many people would be interested in doing something more on this? Great. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming out. Thank you all for hosting us.